I'm glad to be here with all of you. I understand I only have 3 minutes and just 1 minute. No, I'm in the middle of a debate. Yes. No, it's for the United States Congress. No, Espaillat already spoken. No. He said he came here some 50 years ago, learned Spanish, and he studied a lot about poverty. No, he didn't say he passed any bills. No. He's been there 18 years, but he didn't say he passed any bills at all. Well, the guy was only there half of the time. How do you expect? Well, he'll get back to that.
Oh, my God. That's good.
Okay, that was Congress. I thought he was doing a Rudy Giuliani imitation there for a second.
Oh.
Remember that?
More like Bob Newhart.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Congressman Charlie Rangel taking a fake phone call during opening remarks at a recent debate. The New York representative knows his district maybe better than anyone, but he won his last election by less than 1,000 votes, and now his seat could be in danger. Here's NBC News political reporter Casey Hunt.
And so it is not an idea I've talked about. I've actually done it in the community.
Congressman, are you Googling during this debate?
No, I just wanted to show that what he was picking out was consistent.
But it's not fair because they don't have their devices.
Oh, I was going to show it to him, but you're right.
He needs all the help he can get in the Democratic primary. Congressman Charlie Rangel is trying to keep his seat out of the hands of this man, Adriano Espaillat. Once a supporter who nicknamed Rangel the Lion of Lenox Avenue, Espaillat now says Rangel must go. An ethics scandal cost Rangel his position on the powerful Ways and Means Committee.
Has Charlie Rangel been in Congress too long?
Too long, far too long, but more importantly, he's ineffective. And, you know, since he got censured, he's not able to pass any legislation. He can't deliver for the district.
Do you think that you're in this potentially perilous position because of the ethics scandal that you went through? Is that why you're still fighting for your seat?
Hell no.
He's the third longest serving congressman and a founding member of the Congressional Black Caucus. Rangel's ties to the community run deep.
God bless you, and thank you for getting our heartbeat back in El Barrio.
The love that we have for Rangel in this district is incredible.
But thanks to redistricting, New York's 13th now includes Washington Heights and parts of the Bronx. It's more diverse and majority Hispanic. In the campaign's first debate, Rangel charged that Espaillat's only credential was his ethnicity.
Just what the heck has he done besides saying he's a Dominican? He wants to be the Jackie Robinson of the Dominicans in the Congress, which is ambitious, but the fact is that Jackie Robinson was a star before he reached the major leagues, and he's not a Jackie Robinson.
Rangel's comments earned him a rebuke from Reverend Al Sharpton. But it isn't the first time race has been an issue. In 2012, when Espaillat first ran against Rangel, he sent out a flyer labeling a Hispanic official as a traitor for backing Rangel.
And I think this district feels splintered. It doesn't feel like it has a big tent where everybody could be inside.
Do you think this campaign is about race?
You know, when I fell into that trap, even Reverend Sharpton said, we shouldn't be divisive and talk about race. There's no legislation I pass that I have to think black, Latino, Jewish. I think what is best for my country and my district.
4 years ago, Rangel voted to roll back key portions of Dodd-Frank. Espaillat has also attacked Rangel for having ties to Wall Street.
You know, I don't even think my opponent knows where the hell Wall Street is, to be honest with you.
The New York Times endorsed Rangel's opponent, saying it's time for change. But the 84-year-old New York native says he's not ready to retire.
And you think you're speeding up, not slowing down?
I tell you one thing, whatever I'm doing, there's nobody doing it better.
I am a fourth-generation Kansan. I was born here, educated here, done my life's work here. Don't tell me I'm not from Kansas. The people of Kansas elected me to go to the U.S. Senate. The U.S. Senate is in Washington. My home is Dodge City, and I'm damn proud of it.
Mr. Orman.
Well, I suspect, Senator, I've been to Dodge City more this year than you have.
How many times?
And I've been there 4 times this year. I've been there 4.
Well, I've been about 7, so you're wrong on that.
Okay. Hey, wow, that was one to watch. A little salty.
between those two gentlemen going back and forth. Joining us now from Independence, Kansas, MSNBC political correspondent Casey Hunt. So Casey, fill us in, because this was a barb fest going back and forth between Roberts and Orman.
Hey, Thomas. Yeah, we didn't even expect to be in Kansas during this midterm election, but suddenly control of the Senate could hinge on Senator Pat Roberts.
Dodge City is my home, and I'm damn proud of it. I'm a fourth-generation Kansan.
For Senator Pat Roberts, there's suddenly no place like home.
You know that Kansas means people of the South win?
I'm learning that.
Welcome to Kansas.
This week, he's bringing in reinforcements, hosting John McCain, and campaigning with Bob Dole, a home state legend.
We need a steady hand because the world's on fire.
Roberts is trying to convince his neighbors that he hasn't gone Washington, as he fights an unexpected challenge from independent businessman Greg Orman.
We have to change course because our country is headed for National Socialism. That's not right. It's changing our culture. It's changing what we are all about.
Roberts was first elected more than 3 decades ago. He has a home outside Washington, and it's been years since he faced a tough election back home.
This is the house where Pat Roberts says he lives when he's in Kansas, but there are questions about how often he's actually here.
Roberts finds himself neck and neck with Orman after Democrat Chad Taylor dropped out of the race. Secretary of State Chris Kobach, a Roberts supporter, tried to force Taylor to stay on the ballot, but the Kansas Supreme Court disagreed.
The Secretary of State's like the referee at the football game, and in this case, the football game is a very hotly contested election. If voters think I'm not making the calls fairly, they can vote against me.
Orman is such a danger to Roberts because he's striking a chord with independents and with voters who are simply fed up.
Washington's broken. We're sending the worst of both parties there. Bitter partisans who seem to care more about pleasing the extremists in their own parties than they do about solving problems. And Pat's just emblematic of that.
How'd you feel about seeing Senator Roberts? Are you a supporter?
Well, I've been a supporter all along, and at the present time, I'm looking at his opposition.
Roberts is trying to turn the race back into a traditional partisan fight, painting Orman as a Democrat in disguise.
You go down the issues. He's for Obamacare, all right? And he's for amnesty, okay? And then you go down the Second Amendment. All of those issues indicate that he's Democrat, not Republican.
National Democrats are cheering Orman on, but there are no guarantees. He refuses to say which party he'll support in the Senate and says he might even switch sides if he's not happy.
So if they are running the Senate for partisan gain, if they are running it like a dictatorship, and I would agree with some of the criticisms that that's what we've seen out of the Senate today, we could change our allegiances and ultimately caucus with the other party.
So because the fight for control of the Senate is so close, the ultimate outcome could come down to the political whims of Greg Orman, who at this point is a political unknown.
Boy, it's really unbelievable, Casey. John Highlands here's got a quick question, John.
Casey, I'm just curious. This is coming as a big surprise to the Republican Party. Obviously, the National Senate Committee has got someone now out there trying to save Pat Roberts. They're trying to define his opponent as a traditional Democrat. Do they have enough time to do that, or are they going to be kind of actually fighting an uphill battle with this little time left on the calendar?
You know, they really do have a serious time crunch, and you're already seeing them try to roll out the sort of traditional steps that a campaign like this would take that they would probably have preferred to start months ago. They're sort of digging into the opposition research files. Orman is now having to deal with attacks on particularly his business record. He's a very wealthy man. He has ties to a former Goldman Sachs person who is now serving time for insider trading. All of that is just starting to come out now, but whether it's enough for them to be able to make a significant dent in this sort of idea. Voters here definitely view Orman as sort of this independent. I'm not sure that there's enough time for them to be able to make that definition before Election Day.
All right, Casey Hunt, thank you so much. In Georgia, veteran Senator Saxby Chambliss is retiring, opening up a power vacuum in the state. The latest NBC News Marist poll shows Democrat Michelle Nunn leading or neck and neck with each Republican rival, setting up an unexpected battleground state. NBC News political reporter Casey Hunt traveled to Georgia in our latest States of Play.
The pecan trees on the Nunn family farm are rooted in history.
We're doing some experimentation with cucumbers and zucchini.
It was here that Michelle Nunn's father, Sam, launched a storied Senate career.
I have a father who served for 24 years in the Senate and taught me that you can make an enormous difference when you enter the public arena with a real statesman-like perspective.
Republicans need 6 seats to win back the Senate, and Nunn could be the key to preventing that. But sometimes it's hard to tell she's a Democrat. In this TV ad, she doesn't even mention it.
Would you have voted for the Affordable Care Act?
So at the time that the Affordable Health Care Act was passed, I was working for Points of Light. I wish that we had had more people who had tried to architect a bipartisan legislation.
So no, yes or no?
So, I think it's impossible to look back retrospectively and say, what would you have done when you were there?
Nunn doesn't know who she'll run against this fall, but polls show she'd be competitive against any of her 5 challengers. Leading is businessman David Perdue, the first cousin of former Georgia Governor Sonny Perdue. Not far behind is Congressman Jack Kingston.
Thanks for everything you've done for us. Well, thanks. It's great to be back here.
Who has backing from the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. And gaining momentum is Georgia Secretary of State Karen Handel. She's been endorsed by the Tea Party Express and Sarah Palin.
The conservative who has walked the walk.
And with arch-conservative Congressmen Paul Brown and Phil Gingrey also in the mix, the primaries devolved into a bitter free-for-all.
It's hard to believe that my opponents have been in office for 63 years.
And so here's a person who spent almost his entire time in Congress on the Appropriations Committee, voted for debt ceiling increases, voted for the bridge to nowhere.
She's a 12-year career politician. She's run 5 times for 5 different offices, got elected twice. And
David Perdue is actually part of the establishment as much as anybody.
Contrary to conventional wisdom, it's not necessarily establishment versus Tea Party.
Do you consider yourself a member of the Tea Party?
Well, tell me what that is. I mean, I have many ideals that we agree on.
Well, somebody who I support so much of the Tea Party values.
I get a little frustrated with all of the different labels out there. I suppose, yes, I would be Tea Party.
The Republican primary will likely head to a runoff, which means 8 more weeks of infighting. That's all good news for Michelle Nunn.
When I look at the Republican primary, I see a race to the extremes, and I see kind of more of what is happening already in Washington, the dysfunction and the polarization.
Casey, great job. I love the way Nunn schools you, saying you really can't look back at what you would have done and how you would. You can't look back.
Impossible to know.
Actually, you can, but okay. Trying to win a race. Chuck Todd, how big of an upset would it be if Georgia went Democrat in this race, let alone Kentucky?
Well, I think, if you looked at just the demographics, the upset would be Kentucky, not Georgia. Georgia's shifting. Georgia is moving. Georgia's going to be a swing state in 2020. I think the question is, do Democrats have a chance a little bit quicker simply because maybe the Republican primary, the eventual Republican nominee gets too far to the right, and Michelle Nunn, there's a reason she drops the 1,000 points of light thing. Right? It's about being able to say, whoa, I was working with George H.W. Bush. By the way, did I tell you I was working with George H.W. Bush? That is a way to win now in Georgia, but we are about 2 cycles away from Georgia being a swing state.
So one of the Democrats reportedly cashing in off Hollywood is Senator Mark Begich of Alaska. He's among several incumbents facing tough challenges that could make or break Republican hopes of taking back the Senate. Casey Hunt traveled to Anchorage for the latest installment of our States of Play series.
It's called the last frontier, Alaska, a state that might also be the end of the road for the Democratic Senate.
We come up here for various reasons. My parents came up here pre-statehood when there was not what we're standing on today didn't exist.
Alaska is more than twice the size of Texas, but more people live in Delaware than live here. For Democrat Mark Begich, it's small-town campaigning that spans thousands of miles of some of the most remote wilderness in America.
Usually I see at the fisheries meeting, you're about the 3rd row in over to the left.
Begich is usually listed as one of the top 5 most vulnerable Democrats. In 2008, Begich barely beat Republican Senator Ted Stevens, who'd just been indicted. On a single day in Kodiak, Begich toured a commercial fishing boat, a salmon cannery, met with Alaska natives, and opened a new campaign office.
This race is going to be a tight race. when done and said, will be probably a 1 or 2% race. Which is, in Alaska, we would call those landslides.
It's nearly 5,000 miles away, but decisions made in D.C. have a real impact here on everything from fish to oil. That makes Washington gridlock particularly hard on Begich. He's left pitching himself as a thorn in President Obama's proverbial backside.
When it hurts Alaska, they're going to hear from me straight ahead. There's not going to be any of this mamsy-pamsy soft talk. They're going to hear directly from me.
Do you think that Alaskans want more than a thorn?
Some might call that a thorn, some might call it aggravating, some might call it, I'm going to fight for Alaska. That's what it is.
To unseat Begich, national Republicans have bet big on Dan Sullivan, a Marine reservist and former state attorney general.
Senator Begich has voted with Barack Obama 97% of the time in 2013, one of the most liberal voting records in the U.S. Senate.
But Sullivan's come under attack from both sides. National Democrats have already spent more than $3.5 million on ads like this.
Dan Sullivan was going to cut the people out from decisions regarding the land and the water.
This idea had to have been cooked up by somebody who wasn't from here.
And Republican Lieutenant Governor Meade Treadwell says Sullivan is too new to Alaska.
We got 50,000 Alaskans that work in fishing, 47,000 Alaskans that work in aviation. And I've worked with these communities, and Dan Sullivan just got here.
Back for another round is Joe Miller, who was endorsed by Sarah Palin in 2010. He won the Republican nomination, then lost to Senator Lisa Murkowski in the general election. In some ways, he's pushing the whole field to the right.
Do you think President Obama should be impeached?
I do. You're asking a guy who could actually be a judge in a Senate chamber on a bill coming forward from the House that hasn't been written yet. I haven't read it yet.
If I'm in the U.S. Senate, articles of impeachment would come to the U.S. Senate. Under the Constitution, the U.S. Senate stands as the jury. If that happens, I would, of course, take that very, very seriously.
As the primary season closes, polls show a tightening race. And as Mark Begich tries to hold on to his seat, he'll have to convince voters he's still less Washington and more Alaska.
What you hear from maybe the Lieutenant Governor or Dan Sullivan, you hear over and over again this desire to split the government up. Democrats here, Republicans here. That's not who Alaskans are.
Sounds like there's a lot of disdain for Washington in Alaska.
Yeah, there's a lot. And if anything, if Begich has one problem, it's how dysfunctional Congress is. It's funny, he's one of the people who's most affected by that because Alaska is so reliant on the federal government. The regulations matter a lot in people's everyday lives. And that's why he's made that comment about being a thorn for the president. But compared to some of Alaska's previous legislators, he's sort of been reduced to being a thorn. And he has to explain why it is, exactly what he has managed to accomplish when nothing is moving through Congress.
Governor Scott Walker is counted among the most promising governors, Republican governors in the country. But as it turns out, he's also among the most vulnerable. MSNBC political correspondent Casey Hunt is just back from Wisconsin, where both he and his opponent are bringing in some of the biggest names in the country.
What they want to do is make an example of him to other governors around the country. They want to show other politicians, don't do what Scott Walker did, because if you do, we're going to punish you the same way.
Someday they might be rivals, but this week, Chris Christie was in Wisconsin, standing side by side with Governor Scott Walker.
Showing off some of our good work here in Wisconsin. Yeah, this is pretty cool.
But before Walker gets to 2016, he has to survive this year's re-election.
If you lose this election, can you pick yourself up, dust yourself off, and still run for 2016, or would a loss here mean that you would have no shot at being president?
Well, my plan is, if the voters see fit, is to be governor over the next 4 years.
Are you committed to serving a full term?
Well, that's my plan.
Walker survived a recall election in 2012. But now he's running neck and neck with Democrat Mary Burke, a former Trek bicycle executive.
Mary! Mary!
She's striking a more pro-business tone than some of the Democrats who've lost to Walker in the past.
I love our dear friend, the next governor of Wisconsin, Mary Burke!
Burke got a boost from the First Lady this week, drawing a crowd of thousands. And President Obama is slated to campaign here before Election Day.
Do you think the president is a good model as an executive? Is it someone you would model your own leadership style after?
You know, I probably look to other models. There's a lot of people that I admire, whether it's Abraham Lincoln or whether it's George Washington. I mean, there's different things to take from different leaders.
Neither candidate has been free from scandal. Walker is caught up in a campaign fundraising investigation looking into whether his team illegally coordinated with outside groups.
Do you feel like you operated within the spirit of the law?
Absolutely.
Are you 100% comfortable with everything you and your aides did
Absolutely.
in fundraising for the recall?
Mm-hmm.
And Mary Burke is being questioned for plagiarizing portions of her jobs plan.
Democrat Mary Burke accused of plagiarizing nearly word for word from other governors for her jobs plan, tripping up this morning when asked to define plagiarism.
This probably using words, exact words from a source that doesn't. That isn't cited.
She said she spent hundreds of hours putting the plan together. I would think if you're putting hundreds of hours into a plan, you'd know where it came from.
It's about Governor Walker trying to distract from his really poor jobs record and the fact that he doesn't have a plan that actually is working.
Can you name an idea in your jobs plan that was original to you?
I would say all of them are ones that I support and that I believe are going
But are
to
they
work
original
here in
to
Wisconsin.
you? Are they your ideas?
Yeah, they're ones that I believe are going to work here.
Republicans across the country have looked to Walker as an example of how to govern like a true conservative. And now, Democrats have one last chance to throw him out of office.
And I'm not backing down, not 1 inch from this. And you know why? Because the future of Wisconsin is at stake.
You know, I was going to ask you, Casey, about the strange relationship between Chris Christie and Scott Walker, but I'm stunned that Mary Burke, even in Wisconsin, trying to distance herself from the President of the United States, I just sort of gasped when she said, well, no, I wouldn't use him as an example of the type of leader I'd be. I guess you're seeing this everywhere across the country, even in blue states like Wisconsin.
I was a little surprised by that as well, especially because being there, it's so clear, and obviously we know from being here that it's a base election in Wisconsin and that it's really going to depend on driving up turnout. The number of undecided voters in Wisconsin is so low. It's like 4% of the electorate at this point. So I thought it was telling that she decided that she actually needed to distance herself from the president. And she is one of the few people who does have President Obama coming in to campaign for her later this month. Obviously, you saw Michelle Obama. I mean, President Obama can't go very many places. So for her to both say on the one hand, hey, yes, love to have you, but on the other hand, clearly she feels pressure with that small sliver of independence to put some distance there. Do you think that President Obama is a strong leader?
You know, President Obama has a lot on his plate, and it seems like whether it's the oil spill that took place earlier a number of years ago in the Gulf, to this Ebola crisis now, to ISIS gaining strength. I mean, you look at all the combination of things like that.
And do you think he's acted as a strong leader in those crises?
I think there's definitely, like with Ebola, we have definitely been late to the table in making decisions about that, being sure that CDC understands and gets messages out to hospitals.
So you don't think he showed strong leadership?
You know, certainly there are issues that I certainly think, no.
There she goes
Wow.
again. There she goes again.
There she goes again.
You know what?
Well, it's just not.
They're innocent
These are not hard
questions.
questions to answer,
No.
but Casey asks them in such a nice way.
With bullets in her eyes.
Sometimes the simplest questions are the toughest.
No, you can be so mean. I can't even believe it. I'm scared.
She's
I'm looking at her
vicious.
right now, and look at me. My eyes are getting
Wow.
wide, and I'm like starting. I can't even look at her. I have to go back here. That
I'm
was
nervous.
Democratic Senator Kay Hagan trying to answer that question. So here's Casey Hunt with more on her states of play.
In North Carolina, both the barbecue and the politics come with vinegar.
I think all of us have seen some of the most disastrous things taking place in North Carolina since Tom Tillis has been Speaker of the House.
What's the nicest thing you have to say about Senator Hagan?
Look, I don't know Senator Hagan that well. What I do know is we have very different visions for America.
This is poised to become the most expensive Senate race in history. But nearly $100 million isn't buying much in the way of inspiration.
So please know, when you look at his policies of adding your retirement income to be taxed, y'all, that's just wrong. That is just so wrong.
Senator Hagan needs to be replaced, and President Obama needs to get into a mode where he's working with Congress.
North Carolina could be critical to Republican hopes of taking the Senate. Voters here backed President Obama in 2008, but supported Mitt Romney in 2012, when conservatives also won control of the state legislature.
Speaker Tom Tillis froze teacher salaries. Our state is 46th in the nation.
Deep cuts to education and a new voter ID law sparked mass protests called Moral Mondays.
Attacking teachers and students and the unemployed and the poor is a heck of a good year.
They set the backdrop for a Senate race that's been flooded with big names and outside money.
Isn't there some metric here that this state's the biggest?
Maybe $100 million.
That's amazing to me. I've never seen anything like that where I come from.
Through it all, Hagan has maintained a slight edge in the polls. But anxiety over ISIS and Ebola is roiling the race in the final weeks.
We need to make sure that we have people at the top that are getting the situation under control and making Americans feel like they're not making up the plays as they go.
Hagan needs distance from the president, but she has to be careful. When President Obama won here in 2008, African Americans turned out in droves.
That's what it's going to take.
If she's going to win this year, she needs the Obama coalition to stick together.
There's no alternative to the African American vote being out there. And on the ground, we're going to do everything we can to get the vote out.
Hey, you just hang in there, man. We got your back.
Democrat Mark Pryor is still hanging on in Arkansas, but he's been slipping in the latest polls. He's now down by 4 to Tom Cotton. Time to bring out the big guns, and there's no one bigger in Arkansas than Bill Clinton. Casey Hunt is on the trail.
I love my native state. Without you, I never would have had a chance to do anything. And I didn't come back to the briar patch. I'm here. I came back to the future.
For Bill Clinton, this is where it all began.
Bill Clinton, who announced today that he wants to be the Democratic presidential nominee.
I'm proud to say that here in Arkansas, thanks to many of you on this lawn today, we have led the way.
Now Clinton is trying to save what's left of his party in his home state. Senator Mark Pryor, the son of Clinton confidant David Pryor, in danger of losing to Republican Congressman Tom Cotton.
I didn't come here to talk about my opponent, but let me take this opportunity to do so. You know, he went to Harvard, right? I know. He couldn't get into UCA. What can I say? President's unpopular in Arkansas. They want you to make it a protest vote. All three of these races, they're saying, hey, you may like these guys, but hey, you know what you got to do. You got to vote against the president. After all, it's your last shot. It's a pretty good scam, isn't it?
Before President Obama was elected, Arkansas had just one Republican in Congress. Now, Mark Pryor is the last Democrat left.
People like my parents used to vote Democratic, but the Obama Democrats in Washington no longer represent Arkansas's conservative values.
Is this still the Arkansas you govern?
Oh, I think so. I think we got a really good chance. I think he's run a great campaign, and I think I expect him to win.
Can he win this race for you?
I've got to win this race on my own.
But if there's one thing they agree on, it might just be Bill Clinton.
I think a lot of Arkansans, like a lot of Americans, look back on the Clinton years compared to the Obama years and view them very favorably.
Mr. President, or should I say Grandpa, can I get a selfie? Let's do it.
Pryor, I actually asked him about the Ebola crisis yesterday at his rally, and I think that it sort of illustrates the problem he has. He ran an ad attacking Tom Cotton on Ebola, but this is what he had to say when I asked him whether the Obama administration had handled it well. Do you think that the Obama administration has done an appropriate job handling the Ebola crisis?
I would say that it's hard to know because I haven't heard the latest briefing on that to know all the details. I mean, I read the paper and all, but my impression is that we have people over there, both from CDC and other medical type people, and even some engineers to try to build, medical facilities. That's what they need over there. They need the medical infrastructure.
And have we been aggressive enough in helping them do it?
I'd have to see the latest numbers.